I'm Jessie Curley. I'm one of the advisors with the Massachusetts Small Business Development Center. And welcome to everyone who's coming in. I just want I don't have any videos, so just a thumbs up that you can hear me. Or Sam, just let me know, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Great. Excellent.
Yes.
Okay. Thanks, folks. All right, well, welcome. And I'm so thrilled that we're all here together. There's new updates and new information to share with you today. And the intention for this hour together is to a few things. One is for you to get updates on what's happening with various business resources right now. Also to meet the team of resource advisors here that all work together from various organizations to serve small business owners. And then we'll use some time for updates, and then hopefully the majority of the time is for your questions and to help you. And then also if people need to set up individual sessions, we can talk with you about that as well. So like I said, this is brought to you by a team of collaborators. We're called the Western Mass Means Business, and that's made up of a number of organizations. We have SCORE with us today. We have the Center for Women in Enterprise. We also have other partners who aren't here at this moment, Valley Community Development, Franklin County CDC. Oh, and we also have Common Capital here today. Sorry about that. And so there are other, excuse me, there are other providers that we work with as well. We've got a number of locations of the Massachusetts Small Business Development Centers throughout Massachusetts, including Salem State and Clark University. We can offer this to you today at no charge because of our funders. We have the SBA, the State of Massachusetts, and the UMass School of Management. Okay, sorry, it's not, hold on one second. My apologies here, sorry. Okay, so if you will be getting, people who are registered will be getting a copy of this recording, so you don't have to scramble to write things down, but I do want to bring your attention to this slide that shows the contact information for the folks in our partner organizations. So this will be made available to you in the recording. And similarly, as I mentioned, we have a number of Massachusetts Small Business Development Centers throughout the state, and it includes the Procurement Technical Assistance Center for government contracting, and also the Massachusetts Export Center. So tons of resources for you in the area. And I mentioned there's many partner organizations here today, but specifically if you want to continue with the Massachusetts Small Business Development Center in terms of one-on-one confidential business advising, we do have a process for that. And here's the link to our website. It is there for you to enter a request for counseling form, which goes to our office. Then you'll receive an email or a phone call to schedule your appointment. So each center has their own process. This is just what we have at MSBDC. Okay, all right, so I'm actually gonna stop sharing my screen right now. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna launch just a short poll where we're trying to get a sense of who's in the room in terms of your business entity type. So I hope, oh, there you go. Everyone's quick to click there, so thank you. We're gonna hopefully get everyone to enter there. You know, we're gonna do our best to tailor the information, but obviously there's a lot to cover and there are a lot of nuances between different business types and owners and individual situations. So save your questions and you'll have choices later to either come off mute and just ask your question live, or we can also use the chat box for questions. So, all right, so it looks like the poll is showing us that 50% in the room are sole proprietors. That's great, we got a lot of good updates for you. 29% LLC. The next largest group is nonprofits, great. And then C Corp is the last one. So thank you so much. I'm gonna stop sharing that. share results. Okay. All right, I don't know why I can't get this to go away. There we go. Okay, so the first person who's going to speak to us today, her name is Dawn Larochelle, and she is one of the advisors with the Center for Women in Enterprise. So she's going to give an update, and like I said, hold your questions. You probably will have lots coming down the pike. Just hold them for we'll try to spend maybe like 15 minutes here to give the update, and then we'll open up the floor for questions. All right, so please welcome Dawn. Thank you. You're still on mute, my dear.
I'm laughing. This is when I was a teacher.
Right.
We used to say to my students all the time, you're on mute, you're on mute. Anyway, hi everyone, I'm Dawn Larochelle. I'm the project manager for COVID business recovery at the Center for Women in Enterprise of Central Mass, which also includes, by the way, Western Mass. Woohoo! I'm from Northampton, so love Western Mass. Anyway, really happy to see so many sole proprietors here because we have really good news for you. You may have heard that President Biden, a week and a half ago, revised the rules about PPP loans to favor small proprietors. And beginning last week on Wednesday and going through next week on Wednesday, May 9th, only businesses with fewer than 20 employees are allowed to apply. So in other words, the funds, the pool of money available to businesses is not going to be swallowed up by larger entities, which is great. The other part of the revisions that President Biden made that TA providers like me have been waiting for with bated breath are that sole proprietors who in the past were ineligible for PPP because they needed to base their loan on net profit, as shown on line 31 of their Schedule C, and many didn't have a net profit or had so little profit that it didn't even pay to apply for a loan. That's been changed. The SBA waved its magic wand, and now you can base your loan calculations on your gross profit, which is line 7 of Schedule C, rather than net profit. I want to take a giant step back because I'm wondering how many of you are under the impression, number one, that the PPP is a loan, and number two, that if you don't take a draw, you're not eligible. Many of my own clients felt this way until I disabused them of that notion. So to take the first one, while the PPP, Payroll Protection Program, is called a loan, it acts exactly like a grant. Because if you use the money according to the rules, and the rules are you have to spend at least 60% of the funds on payroll, and the remaining 40% on another designated list of items. The list is pretty broad. It includes mortgage interest, rent, utilities, software, accounting. If you sustain property damage during a riot in 2020, you can get money if your insurance didn't pay. Certain covered supplier costs, including food, if you're a restaurant, and personal protective equipment. As long as you spend it on those things, then the loan will be forgiven, meaning the bank isn't going to make you pay it back. So while it is technically called a loan, it is actually a grant. And to the question here from Bayak, you need to apply for forgiveness, right? Yes, you need to apply for forgiveness. But number one, the forgiveness application has been greatly simplified for loans of $150,000 or less. It's basically an attestation where you say, I used the money the way I was supposed to use it, and you sign it. Now, I would keep documentation just in case you're audited down the road. But the other thing is that across the nation, not just in Massachusetts, almost 100% of loans that are $100,000, under $150,000 have been 100% forgiven. So it's very close to a guarantee. I saw a question about, can I use the money any way I want? Nope. As I just explained, you must use at least 60% on payroll. If you want, you can use 100% on payroll. And payroll for a sole proprietor with no employees would be your gross profit. You would just quite literally write a check to yourself from your business account to your personal account. The remaining 40% can be used for a pretty broad designated group of things. I'm going to repeat what some of them are. You could pay mortgage interest, rent, utilities. Utilities, by the way, interestingly include transportation on the PPP loan, which is somewhat unusual. What are called covered operations expenses, and that includes things like software, cloud computing, and accounting. Covered property damage. So if your property was damaged during one of the protests or riots in 2020, you can get reimbursed for that as long as you weren't reimbursed by your insurance. And certain supplier costs that are necessary to run your business, including, as I said before, food, if you're a restaurant, which is great. And anything that you want to keep your premises safe. So personal protection equipment. As Jesse wrote, you must have been in business on or before February 15th, 2020 to apply. I'm seeing like tons and tons of questions coming in here. So I think I'm just gonna, let me just finish what I'm gonna say, and then maybe we can go through the questions one by one, so I'm not constantly interrupting the flow, and all of you understand what I'm saying. You can apply for a PPP loan as a sole proprietor or any other type of corporation for the first time, meaning you've never applied for a PPP loan before, in which case all you need to do is take your, well, we'll talk about different calculations for different type of entities, but if you are a sole proprietor with 0 employees, you are now going to take your gross profit, multiply it by 2.5 and add on any idle loan amount that you received. You will not add either an idle advance or PPP funds. Well, if you're a first-time borrower, won't be any PPP funds to forgive. So that's what you will do, and that will be the maximum amount of your loan. If you are a second-time borrower, you would be going for what's called the second draw loan. That means that you applied for and received PPP money on or before August 9th, 2020. Then you need to make those calculations that I just mentioned, but you also would need to show a drop in revenue of 25% between any quarter in 2019 and any quarter in 2020. If you were only open in 2020, then you would pick the first quarter of 2020 to whatever other quarter in 2020 you want. So that's pretty much it. So you know, the new rule just came into effect about the using gross profit instead of net profit, just came into effect yesterday. And there is what's called an IFR, an interim final rule that is 31 pages long and very dense. And I'm a law school graduate, and this is, I'm going through it very, very slowly. So there are still a lot of questions that I have about it. In particular, something I need to pay a little bit of attention to before I start advising my clients is there may be certain cases, depending on how much money you earn, where you're still better off using your net profit, particularly if you have employees, because it looks like if you end up using your gross income and then report over $150,000, that the SBA is going to think that maybe there was fraud and really go over your, they're not just going to accept your attestation. They're going to be going over all your receipts with a fine-tooth comb before they forgive you. So I really need to read this to understand it better. But I'm going to stop now. It looks like there are a lot of questions. Jesse, did you want to read the questions or do you want me to go through them?
Yeah, I'll read the questions for you. Okay, so just to reiterate, in case people aren't seeing the chat, there was a question of whether the PPP can be used by new business owners, and the business start date must be February 15th, 2020 or later. The next question says, to be eligible for the PPP, we need to show quarter 2019 to quarter 2020 loss. Is that correct? And what Dawn was just saying was that there is the option to compare the first quarter of 2020 to another quarter in 2020 if you did not have the 2019. But I'm thinking for Vivek, maybe you'll come on and ask your specific question in a minute, because I'm not sure we answered it.
Just very, very quickly with that though, that's
Sure.
only for people who are applying for the second time. It's called the second draw. So this does not
Thank you.
apply if you're applying for the PPP for the very first time.
Great, good distinction, really important. We're going to put a pin in the unemployment question because I know there's probably a lot, and I'll let Dawn have a minute to explain that. Are there any downsides for credit score having a forgiven loan on your record?
No, zero. Don't worry about your credit if you have a forgiven loan.
Okay. So before we hop over to the unemployment question, does anybody want to come off mute and ask something directly? You know, this is a really great opportunity. You've got experts in the room here. This is your time to ask what you need to, and I just want to give the opportunity before we start talking about that.
I have a question.
Great.
Sure, Joe.
Looks like
My name's Joe.
Thanks.
Yeah. So the PPP loan is it's for 2.5 months. Is that correct?
What you would do with the PPP loan, I don't know where you're getting the 2.5 months. You calculate your loan by looking at your total right now. If you file a Schedule C and you're a sole proprietor, you would look at line 7, which is your gross income. You would multiply that by 2.5. You would divide that, you would take your, sorry, I messed up here. You would take your gross income, you divide it by 12. I should have said that earlier. And then you multiply it by 2.5 plus add on any EIDL loan that you may have received. And that would be the maximum amount that you can earn. There's then what's called, and I think this may be what you're referring to, Joe, there's what's called a covered period. The covered period is a period of your choice between 8 weeks and 24 weeks. You can pick 8 weeks, 24 weeks, or any time in between. And that is the period during which you are required to use all the money. And once you've used up all the money, beginning at the 8-week mark, you can then apply for forgiveness. Does that make sense? Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I got the 2.5 months, I guess, because it's dividing it by 12 and then
multiplying
times
it by
2.5. Yeah,
2.5. Yes.
got it.
Sorry,
Okay,
I confuse myself sometimes.
so if you make $120,000, let's say $120,000 gross, divided by 12 is 10, and then you multiply it 2.5, so it'll be $25,000.
Except there's one catch to that. Congratulations that you earn over $100,000. However, unlike most of my clients, you would have to subtract the $25,000 because the cap would be $100,000.
Okay,
so
great.
The maximum you can do for these purposes is $100,000. The other thing that I should say, which I didn't because it's usually not applicable to the smaller businesses, as a first-time borrower, if $10 million happens to be less than the amount that you would get if you took your gross income, divided it by 12 and multiplied it by 2.5, then you'd get $10 million if $10 million happens to be less. If you're applying for the second time, it's $2 million. But
Okay, so then
you're talking
it'd
about
be
maximums.
Yeah.
Right?
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. So the loan really that you would get would be somewhere between, like if you made $100,000, between 20 and 25,000.
Correct.
Like
exactly.
Okay.
One other thing that I want to point out, I don't know if there are any people who are in the food service business or hotel or accommodations business here. Sorry, this is so ridiculously complicated, but if you are an NAICS Code 72 entity, which means you're a restaurant, you're a caterer, you're a hotel, then you can multiply your average monthly income by 3.5 rather than 2.5. So lucky you.
If it's a second draw.
No, first or second.
That's also for first draws?
Oh, wait a minute. Sorry, correct. Is it just second draw? Now I'm confusing myself. It may be just second draw. So sorry, my
No,
head's
that's okay. I
all-
remember
It is
it
second
being
draw.
as second. Yeah, and again, whether they changed or not, but
Maybe
yes,
just
it's just for
second,
second
just
draw.
second draw, not first. Sorry, guys.
Yeah, no problem. I know you're holding so many details in your mind. Joe, did we complete your questions before we move on to another?
Yes, thank you.
You're very welcome. Okay, a couple other ones. Can you use the money retroactively for rent already paid?
If you've already paid, oh, you mean, can you pay yourself back for the rent? That is a very good question. I believe the answer is yes, but I am not 100% sure, and I would have to check on that for you. What you need to be very, very careful of with the PPP or any other disaster relief funds that you get. So you don't do what we call double dipping. So you can't use, let's say you got a Massachusetts sector specific grant and you've paid your rent for January 2020. You cannot then take the PPP loan and say, okay, I'm using that to pay my January 2020 rent as well. So it becomes a little bit dicey. If you use your own personal funds and not some other grant or loan, I believe the answer is yes. Does anyone else on this panel have a different answer to that?
Well, the piece, I don't have the answer, Dom, but if they're asking folks, this is for the PPP, to declare a use period of 8 to 24 weeks, it's all future, right?
I'm not 100% sure
that's the question.
True.
Okay,
because I think that you could, I know there's certain types of back pay that can be included. So I believe that you can repay yourself for a loan as well, but I'm going to have to get back to you on that.
Okay, so that's a question we'll put a pin in. Okay, there's another one. Oh, no, okay. So those are just recaps. What would you like to share about the unemployment? Because I know this has been a real snarl, and
unemployment is
just to say too that we are not the unemployment experts. That we really strongly recommend that folks contact the unemployment department directly. I know it's a nightmare. You wait on the phone for hours, but we cannot be sort of the last word on it. However, Dawn, being so good in her research, she knows a good bit about it. So let's hear what we know.
The unemployment is a big thorn in my side, guys, that and taxes. Because once again, I am not an expert whatsoever. And as Samalid just correctly said in here, since the SBA has zero control over unemployment, they make the rules with that, not the SBA. So don't blame them. But here's the deal. If you are a sole proprietor or whatever with zero employees and you are collecting unemployment or PUA, you cannot simultaneously collect PPP funds. That would be considered double dipping, particularly given that, remember, these are called paycheck protection program. The idea is to keep people off unemployment. So it would be thwarting the whole purpose if you were also using unemployment and collecting. If, however, you have employees, you can still collect unemployment, provided that the only salary, the only payroll costs you cover with that 60% are your employees' salaries and not your own. To be super, super safe, I would only, in this case, use the PPP funds on your employee salaries. I would not use them on any of the other covered expenses that we discussed. I would use 100% of those funds on employee salaries. If you elect not to do so and use that 40% on all those other allowable expenditures that I mentioned, you need to keep meticulous documentation to avoid even the appearance of impropriety, because it will be assumed, if you're ever audited, that you were taking some of that money for yourself. So you need to be really, really careful. So a lot of my clients will tell me, well, I don't know, do I want to get off unemployment because I'm getting all this money with unemployment and it's more than I'm making with PPP. That's a decision at the end of the day that you're going to have to make for yourself. I can't tell you what to do. It goes against everything in me to tell you accept unemployment funds rather than stay in business. So I have my own partiality there. What I will say is that you can go back on unemployment or PUA once you use up the PPP funds and are forgiven. So that could be an option. And for those of you whose unemployment is going to be ending, in March or April, you may be able to, if you time it right, you may be able to utilize the PPP funds for right after your unemployment ends. So those are just some thoughts right there. Again, please consult unemployment or an unemployment expert on this because I am not one. I'm also, even though it was not asked, going to say something about taxes. I don't know how many of you know or don't know this, but PPP funds are not taxed by the IRS, and you can still deduct all your PPP expenses, even though you're not going to claim your forgiven PPP loan. However, and this is a big however, that is not necessarily true in the great state of Massachusetts. And I've been, again, not a tax expert, although I do have a legal background, but everything I'm reading is strongly suggesting that Massachusetts is going to be instituting some type of tax on the forgivable PPP funds. Of course, it won't be as much as your federal taxes, but it's something you should bear in mind. So once again, what I'm going to tell you is talk to your tax professional. And if you don't have a tax professional, get one. It will be the best money you ever spent. And soapbox, continue with questions.
And just to reiterate, going back to unemployment for a minute, I want to make the clarification between whether people can apply for PPP if they're on unemployment. And it's not that they, and please correct me, it's not that they cannot apply for PPP if they're on unemployment. It's that they have to decide how the dollars fall for them, opposed to something like the Shuttered Venue Grant, where it's like if they see that you've applied, you're not considered. So I just want to make that distinction.
You can apply for those PPP funds, but though right now those loans are being processed really quickly. So you should assume if you apply, you're going to have those funds in your account in like a week or two at most.
That's a good point. That's a really good point.
So I wouldn't even bother unless you know you're going to go off PPP, you're going to go off unemployment, or your unemployment's going to end. I would not do this. And that also, from an ethical standpoint, you're then wasting a lot of time for other people who might be able to take those funds and use them. So unless you know you are willing to go off unemployment or PUA, or that your unemployment and PUA are going to end and dovetail nicely with your receipt of the PPP funds, do not apply, would be my own advice.
Okay, another question came in from Kevin. The business is not taxed. Oh, this is a question. The business is not taxed for PPP funds? Question mark. Or employees who received PPP funds are untaxed?
Both.
Or both?
Both.
Okay, so you want to just like recap that maybe just to...
So correct. So this is a rule again. Thanks to the Appropriations Act 2020, otherwise known as the Bipartisan Miracle. PPP funds are not taxable by the federal government. So your forgiven loan, the government would not tax you on. Additionally, you are now allowed to claim, to deduct rather, expenses that you use PPP funds to pay for. Which didn't used to be the case. So in any event, now that is the case. So you as a business owner are not going to be taxed on this. And the individuals who receive those PPP funds are also not going to be taxed on it, which is wonderful.
Federally.
And that
federally.
Is, well, federally. And then Hannah asked the wonderful question that I just went over, not true in Massachusetts. So I'm biting my tongue to say, I don't want to say Taxachusetts, I really don't, but I want to.
I think you just did.
What I'm going to tell you is you will likely be taxed by the state, not definitively because it's still a little bit murky and I've been keeping my eye on this. But once again, I am not a tax professional. So to be 100% sure, I would talk to your tax professional, hire a tax professional if you do not have one. And I would assume that you're going to be taxed by the state and set some money aside so that you don't get a nasty surprise.
Thank you. The other thing I think might be worth recapping is the deadlines. So the dates, the deadlines, who's it for, when, and I know we're sort of highlighting sole proprietors, which is true. We've got 50% in the room, but isn't it true that this special 4-week period that we are in the middle of is not just a benefit for sole proprietors, it is for any small business, 20 employees or less? Is that correct?
So, okay, so going to take a step back. And guys, if your head is spinning, totally understandable. My head's spinning too. And I, again, live this stuff day in, day out. So let's go over some deadlines. Once again, years in business to apply either for a first or a second draw PPP loan. You must have been in business on or before February 15th, 2020. What it means to have been in business, by the way, is not necessarily your registration. If you were not registered yet as a business, but were doing business and have proof that you received funds, you could use that earlier time and say that you meet the years in business criteria. So that's the one. The entire PPP program ends on March 31st, 2021, or whenever the funds are gone, whichever comes first. I am now relatively optimistic that the funds are not going to be gone before March 31st. The government's done a really, really good job of monitoring that. Nevertheless, I wouldn't, wait. But there's another deadline I want you to bear in mind, March 9th. So the new revisions that we just discussed, or discussed earlier in this presentation, where President Biden said he's putting a moratorium on applications from businesses of 20 employees or greater. That moratorium ends on March 9th, unless for whatever reason, there's a decision to extend it. I'm a little bit unclear about whether or not the new rules referring to the use of gross income as opposed to net income as a Schedule C filer end on March 9th. Because that rule was quite literally put into effect yesterday. I would assume, and I'm reading through this 31-page thing, I'm not automatically seeing a deadline mentioned, but again, to be safe, I would assume that the deadline is March 9th, and I would make sure that whatever financial institution you choose to use, you're talking to a human being, not just doing something online, and that you can get confirmation that they will be allowing you to use your gross income as opposed to net income. Because we've heard some rumors about different financial institutions that have not been aware of this ruling. Jesse asked the question about benefits to businesses that are not Schedule C filers. So if you are, I don't think there were any S Corps based on that poll, but if you are a C Corp, then you can't really take advantage of the gross income rule because in your case, you would be required to have payroll. And if you are a sole proprietor Schedule C Corp and you're not on payroll, you cannot apply for a PPP. So it doesn't benefit you in that respect, but it does benefit you if you are on payroll and you have fewer than 20 employees, you can get in now and not have to compete against very large businesses for funds, and you'll probably get your money quicker. Nonprofits, unfortunately, are not my wheelhouse because the Center for Women in Enterprise only deals with for-profit businesses. But anyway, so Amiel asked, can this new PPP be used for second draw loans? My understanding is yes. But again, I need to pore over this 31-page IFR with a fine-tooth comb. I am talking with my counterpart at Center for Women in Massachusetts in Eastern Massachusetts, and I'm going to try to do a webinar where I really can speak extremely knowledgeably, point by point, of this IFR. So I will put my my email in the chat if anyone wants more information about that. And Len Gendron, my colleague at SCORE, wants to remind everyone he also works. Oh, you do work with nonprofits? Great. Len, would you want to speak?
Len, do you want to? Yeah, I was going to say, why don't you come off? Yeah.
Yeah. SCORE is one of the few organizations that does work with nonprofits. So anybody has needs some help with a nonprofit, contact us. We're all over Massachusetts.
Do you have any knowledge, Len, about how PPP works with nonprofits? Just because that's not my wheelhouse at all.
I don't have any specific knowledge about nonprofits, but we do have folks available to answer any specific questions. So if a nonprofit has a question, let's take it here and we can get, be sure you give us an email and we'll get your answer for you.
Yeah, I'm putting my contact info in the chat, and Len, I would strongly suggest you do too, and Jesse also. Jesse's just a wonderful business advisor as well, and we all work very collaboratively, so we welcome you to use any or all of us for any of your needs. So that's, any other questions about PPP or any other government program? I don't know if anyone's interested right now or has questions about the targeted idle that you may have heard of, or the shuttered venue operators grant. Just feel free to yell out those questions.
I have a question.
We'll find out. Yes, Joe.
So I got like a $19,000 idle loan last June. Does that affect anything in applying for this PPP?
So it doesn't affect you because you can apply for PPP and idle except for two things. Number one, lucky you're going to get to add your idle loan, not an idle advance, but the $19,000 idle loan, you're going to get to add to your loan calculation after you take your gross profit, divide it by 12 and multiply it by 2.5. You're going to add the amount of your idle to that. In your case, it sounds like you might, that might not be a huge advantage for you because it sounds like you're already over income. But in case you're not, you can do that. The other thing that you have to be really, really careful of, and this is what I was talking about again earlier in this presentation, is not double dipping. You cannot use the idle and the PPP for identical things. So for example, let's say you use your idle to pay for your rent January and February 2020. You then cannot go and get a PPP and say, I'm using my PPP loans to pay my January and February, January 2021 rent. You cannot use the PPP for your January and February 2021 rent if you already used idle to pay for that. You can use the PPP to pay your March 2021 rent. So you can do it in the same category, but you cannot pay for the identical thing with two different funds. That is called double dipping. Or I think the fancier term that the SBA likes to use is duplication of benefits, and that will get you in great big trouble.
And what about, can you explain the length of times again for the PPP that you choose?
So right, so the PPP, that covered period, so the period during which you have to use up all the money, you can choose any period between a minimum of 8 weeks and a maximum of 24 weeks.
Okay,
or any
thank
time
you.
in between.
Okay, great.
I have a question, if I may jump in. Sure. So this may be a little bit nuanced or niche, but has there been any talk about changing the way in which average monthly payroll is calculated for small businesses that launched in early 2020, essentially prior to the eligibility deadline, but without any business dealings in 2019? Just because speaking from my personal experience, we launched early January 2020. We're on the cusp of several contracts, which were then all postponed, withdrawn for like 5-6 months. And then we started making money. But to calculate our eligibility, it divides over 12, right? So you basically need to include those months where you didn't make any money.
Unfortunately, yes. So that's kind of the short answer to
That's what I
that. Yeah. Sorry. Wish I had better news.
No, it's all right.
Dawn, that's a good segue.
Yeah.
I was just gonna say that's a good segue to these new startup businesses. So I want to bring the attention to Mike, who asked if there's any available programs for businesses that began in the last quarter of 2020. And also there's Michelle asked about if there was any programs for new businesses.
So unfortunately, and this has been another thing that for me has been endlessly frustrating as a TA, there just have not been a lot of grants that are awarded to new businesses with COVID, even though those businesses are the most vulnerable and likely to go out of business. So that's the sad thing. There are, however, some good loans that are available, and Sam has written down some of them. Additionally, Emil, you should jump in and talk about some of the wonderful loans that Common Capital is offering. I've sent so many of my clients to Common Capital, and they've just been a godsend. Do you want to jump in, Emil?
Yes, and before Emil talks about that program, I also want to bring your attention, Samalid put earlier in the chat, quick note, check out our most recent e-newsletter with the latest information about the PPP and the new grant program that aims to empower Black-owned small businesses. So what I'm curious about, if anyone here knows about, this is a very recent grant through the NAACP, and I don't know the criteria for that one in terms of the business start date. So I'm wondering if anybody knows that and if it might apply for some of the folks who are asking about business startups.
Business start date for what?
The eligibility for the new NAACP, they're calling it the Empower Black-owned Small Business. Okay. The link's up there. Again, we're trying to do our best to get up to speed, but take a look at that one too. All right, and then Emil, I didn't mean to interrupt. If you want to talk about your program next, that'd be great.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Common Capital is one of, first, my name is Emil Farjo. I'm the Business Assistant Coordinator at Common Capital. Common Capital is a community development financial institution, and as well as an SBA microlender. We are located in Springfield, but we cover all Western Mass, anything west of Worcester, all the way to the border of Massachusetts. And we make loans to small businesses, startup and existing businesses. And those loans comes with a free business assistant. We can coach you and advise you. We provide a expert business consultant to work with you directly. It is for no charge as long as you have a loan from Common Capital. And we look to our applicant in a different lens, like the banks do. The banks are great, but we are different. We care about the community, so we don't turn anyone just because they don't have a perfect credit or they don't have collateral. So we work with the client individually. We see their story, and the character is very important for us. And our loans is up to $300,000, and we cover commercials as well as any. We have so many products in our portfolio, how to help the businesses, and we have a specific program for the businesses in Springfield. We partner with the city of Springfield. We provide a flexible financing to help the businesses recover from the pandemic. So if you are a business in Springfield and you hit bad in the pandemic, we have a program partner with the city of Springfield to give loans in a different way, that partial of this loan can be forgiven. There is some flexibility in the business, but you should be affected by the pandemic, and your location will be in a low or moderate income location in the city of Springfield. I would put my information. I think someone put the information about Common Capital. Please, don't hesitate. And we are in this network. We always available to help people and as well as, see them successful. Thank you.
I had mentioned earlier about the importance of anybody who is looking for a lender to find a lender where you're talking to a human being who is responsive and cares about you and your business. And that's one of the things that I really love and value about Common Capital. As someone who owned a restaurant and 2 catering businesses back in the day and did not have that experience, I learned the hard way that not all lenders are created equal, and you need to pick your lender very, very carefully.
Great, thank you. So in the chat, there's a bunch of resources that are being put there. So if you have a moment, just make sure to take a look at that before you head out. There's links to this new grant Samalid put up again. We've got people's contact emails, various resources for you. And I'm also going to, just in case some folks start to head out, I'm going to put a survey link in the chat box, and we would really appreciate your feedback because we're running these on a monthly basis, the first Thursday of the month. And as you can tell, we really want this to be a time for Q&A and to help people get their specific answers to their questions. So we would really appreciate your feedback to tailor the program to meet your needs. So I'll put that in the chat. And anyone else, we do have more time. So does anyone else want to hop on with their questions?
And don't be shy. Throw those questions at us. And if we don't know, we will find out for you.
Hi, I have a question.
Sure. Who am I talking to right now?
This is Ruth Gaspard. I'm here with my business partner, Mike. We're actually just starting getting into this business. But I know you guys were talking about the PPP, but that obviously doesn't apply to us. But we were just wondering if, are you guys going to be discussing other things like how to start a business and just other, the basic knowledge?
So we can certainly answer any questions you have about that. And we've got some wonderful resources on this panel. The other thing that I would strongly recommend that you do is look at either Center for Women in Enterprise or SCORE or MSBDC. Check out our websites because all of us offer free classes for businesses. Like at CWE, we have one called Steps to Start a Business and Business Plan Basics, and we have legal considerations for new businesses. I personally always recommend that new fledgling business owners start there and then make an appointment for a one-on-one consult with a business advisor. And again, there's a wealth of TA providers on this panel. You can check out all of our websites and
and where do I check that out? Where would I check that out again? Can you repeat that?
So yes, so I will put down, maybe all of us can put down our websites. Okay, great.
Yeah, I'll jump into Ruth because I can speak from my experience. So I'm a advisor with the MSBDC, but I also have received services from this team here as a business startup. And so one of the things that's super valuable is, as Don was saying, is each of these organizations offer these webinars plus counseling or business advising. And it's such a great combination because you can learn through the webinar process of, what are the basics of setting up a business? What are the legal considerations, et cetera, et cetera. And then you can connect with an advisor one-on-one. So there's no shortage of resources in that department. And when you receive the recording of this webinar, it'll have everyone's contacts, the websites. It has also at least for our center, what form you need to fill out. It's called a request for counseling form in order to set up a session with someone.
Okay.
Many of the sites also have recorded webinars on the sites. And Len just put in the chat, we happen to have SCORE is running a startups webinar at 11 today. Is that right?
Okay.
And then he's put in the website address there for you.
Okay.
So does that help, Ruth? Does that get
No,
you
that helped.
started?
Very helpful. Thank you so much.
And Ruth, I would encourage you to check all of them out. I always laugh because sometimes I feel like, you know how when you go to a hairdresser and then you use a different, like so a different hairdresser there and you're embarrassed to come back because you felt like you were cheating. I feel like clients just feel like if they use one organization and then take advantage of another organization's resources, they've been cheating. Not at all. So I recommend strongly that you check out every single one of our websites, pick the classes that are interesting to you, pick duplicative classes because each one might have a different spin, see where you feel comfortable. And really, these are your tax dollars at work. They're all free resources. Please take advantage.
Okay, thank you so much, Don. I appreciate it.
My
And
pleasure.
don't forget us. If you want any finance, don't forget us. Come to
Okay.
Sba Capital. Okay.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
And that's the other thing I just want to reiterate is, you know, even myself, we get these stories in our heads about being a startup and thinking, oh, we have to have all these things figured out before we go talk to resources. And at least everyone in this group, not true. I mean, you can make an appointment with any one of the advisors just to have an exploratory conversation. You can make an appointment with Common Capital. You know, Emil is happy to have that conversation, but without any kind of obligation or you having to like have it all figured out, you know, so throw that idea out and just connect. And that's the start of.
And there's
going.
exactly what Jesse said. Plus, on top of all that, there's no such thing as a stupid question. If you ever see a business advisor and that business advisor makes you feel yay big or tells you that, oh, what you're doing is a hobby, not a real business and doesn't take you seriously, find someone else. It's not you, it's them. Really, everyone, I know that everyone on this panel and all of our organizations would really, you know, we're there for you every step of the way to answer every single question that you have. And honestly, we had all the same questions when we opened up our businesses. So it's a little bit of advice there. Any other questions as we're winding down?
Great questions, and you know, hope to see you next month too if you want to come back for more. I'm sure there'll be some updates or changes in the next month. There's something new to talk about. And you know, I didn't have time to grab it, but I was trying to find the link for the Sba newsletter. I just want to mention that if any of my colleagues have that and you want to just throw it in, but one of the things that the SBA is trying to do is to encourage people to sign up for their updates and newsletters so that when there are changes that you can get directly informed of, you know, when they put out the new formula or if there's changes to the EIDL Advanced, whatever it is. So thank you to, I don't know if Dawn, if it looks like you're typing away.
Yeah, I was just telling Joe had some questions about programs for Hispanic businesses, and I just said if he emails me, I can give him a bunch of things that I think he should look into.
Super, great. Well, you know, we'll stay on here, and if there are people who have questions, but if we're complete, you know, feel free to sign off. Again, we're happy to help, and we'll be here next month. Any last questions?
I had a quick question. I'm sorry, and I don't know if this is the right forum for it. I'm seeing all these different places where I can register. I'm a new business. I just registered like this month.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And there's like, I've been reading things like I can register as women-owned, Black-owned, and there's all these different places. So I wasn't sure like even where to start. It feels overwhelming. Or what are the benefits of registering with these different places?
So I can jump on with that. What I would tell you is, as a new business owner, you probably don't want to be thinking about that right now. All of those certifications can be hugely beneficial to you down the line, both for just PR purposes, but also there are all kinds of ways you can get access to government contracts that often when contracting out business, governments are told, we really want you to work with a Black-owned business or a woman-owned business or, whatever. So there are many, many advantages to this kind of certification, but it's an involved process. You really want to get your sea legs before you jump into that. Sam, aren't you going to be running a class on WeBank certification this week? And do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so I won't be running it myself, but I'll be one of the participants speaking about it. And I actually wanted to share a couple of things. We get this question a lot, and so I wrote an article on LinkedIn. I'm going to post the link on the chat that it kind of gives you links to all of the various certifications so you can get yourself informed. But March 10th, we're going to have a webinar with the CWE. Michelle Miller is going to be running that webinar. I'm going to be one of the participants, and I want to post this on the chat because it answers, basically, they will answer questions about the WeBank, the certification, but there are others. There's the Greater New England Suppliers Council. There's also federal. There's like federal, state, and private certifications. So it's not just one certification for everything. And you kind of just need to, based on your industry, based on who your customers are, is how you would choose which certification is best for you. Because if your customers don't value the certification because maybe they're not required to hire a woman business enterprise or a minority business enterprise in order to get contracts for them, then they're not really necessarily going to care whether or not you're certified or not. So you kind of have to look at which industry you're in, who your customers are likely to be. And if you want to get into government contracting, then absolutely you want to go for the state or federal certification. If you are just going to be working with private industry, then you would look at those private industry certifications like WeBank, like the Greater New England Minority Supplier Development Council, and others. And so I did post that link on the chat, and you guys can check out that article that has all the links.
Sam, do you want to also post the link to the webinar? Because perhaps Michelle would like to come and just
absolutely
dip her feet in and
now.
learn a little for the future.
Yeah, it's hard to talk and post at the same time, but I will do it.
I have that same problem.
Just one second.
So Michelle, who asked the question, Michelle Miller is my boss. She's the director of CWB Central Mass. She's also terrific and really knowledgeable about this. And Sam is a gold mine of information if you haven't figured that out already. So I think this would be, even though my advice, and maybe you disagree with me, Sam, is still get your sea legs before you start looking into certification.
Oh, I don't disagree. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Because part of the reason, and I say this well, I don't say this on the article actually, but I do say this when I talk to people directly, and I will probably mention this at the webinar, and Michelle will mention this as well, is that when you get a certification, that's just the beginning. That's just the beginning. You need to have set aside a budget for your marketing, a budget for travel. I mean, right now, everything is being done virtually. So there's a little bit of a break right now for people. They can connect with folks virtually. But the benefit of having these certifications is that you can connect. For example, WeBank does a lot of trade shows. And so they invite you to come into a trade show and meet some of the procurement, some of the buyers for those companies who are looking for suppliers, who are looking for services. And so you have to travel, and at least pre-COVID, a lot of those, trade shows were happening near Boston. So if you're in Western Mass, you have to have a, budget in time to be able to travel to Boston, go up there, maybe have a really nice tablecloth, have your materials, brochures, business cards, all of that stuff. So we always advise people that when you're entering into the area to set aside a budget for marketing that's specifically to market yourself to the companies that you want to have contracts with, because that's the whole purpose of getting the certification. And that's the same. It's a little bit different for government. For government, when you have a government certification made to the Office of Supplier Diversity, you go to Combis. There's an online portal where you have to sign up for, and that's where you look for bids, for proposals. And with that too, I always advise people, find out, depending on the industry you're in, find out who the prime contractors are who have those contracts. And many of them have requirements for the contracts to set aside a certain amount, 15%, 20% of their contract amount for minority-owned business or women business enterprises. And so, or veteran-owned businesses. And so you connect with those contractors, you make relationships, you build relationships with them, and then they'll hopefully you get a piece of the pie, so to speak, as well. Not to say that you couldn't bid for a contract yourself, but to Dawn's point, if you don't have a lot, a couple years of experience in that industry and a track record, the people who are interviewing folks, looking at the bid responses, they might not pick you because they're, you're an unknown entity. So it takes a couple of years to kind of get rolling when you're doing government contracting. And PTAC will be a great resource, the Procurement Technical Assistance Center, for those who feel like that's the way they want to go. They want to do government contracting. Grace Oda is our local business advisor for PTAC. And I'll put the link to the website there. You can attend. She does some webinars as well, explaining all of this stuff regarding specifically government contracting.
So Michelle, don't like worry if this seems overwhelming, because once you're ready, we'll guide you through it step by step by step. I would advise you to come to this class, even though I wouldn't advise you to seek certification right away, just so you get an overview and kind of have a sense of who the players are, and it's in the back of your mind as you move forward. The other thing I wanted to throw a plug in for, and maybe someone else can throw in, I don't even know if we have a link yet, but on March 31st for Women's History Month, the we're having the Western Massachusetts Women in Business conference, which is just a wonderful opportunity for both brand new businesses, people considering owning businesses, as well as for people who are well entrenched in entrepreneurship, to attend, to network, to hear some fantastic presenters. Our theme this year is a very optimistic kind of 2021 opportunities and challenges going into the future. So I think it's going to be a really fun and rewarding conference, and a great way to make contacts and get those creative juices flowing. So do we even have a link to that yet, Michelle, Sam, or no?
No, I don't think so yet.
So watch for it. Get on our mailing list, and you'll find it.
If folks sign up for the SBA updates, the link that I sent before, Norman, who's the local, the Massachusetts SBA
he's so good.
PR person, he's going to be sending on a save the date very soon.
Yeah, and those updates, by the way, sign up for those updates for sure, because if you haven't already figured this out, the landscape with these COVID funds changes constantly. It's ever shifting. What I say today might be irrelevant literally tomorrow, which is part of what makes my job exciting and also frustrating. So if you sign up for those updates, and if you sign up on any of our websites and sign up for our e-newsletters, you will be privy to the latest and the greatest, and know immediately when there are changes, which is super important right now when it comes to funding. That's it.
Thank you, Dawn and Emil and Len and Samalid, everyone who is just a wealth of knowledge. And I hope you saw Len's comment that really we all work together, where you can come in the door at any place and we'll help you find the right spot. So thank you so much for all of your time, and best of luck to everyone, especially new startups and people who are continuing to chug along. So keep up the good work, and just know that we're here to help you out. All right. Take good care. Bye, everyone.